Welcome to Counseling Theories. This is the first in a series of podcasts that you're going to be listening to during this course. So we're going to start with the basics. What is a counseling theory? So what we're going to talk about today is the definition of a theory, model, and technique. We're going to compare and contrast them and give you some examples. So what is a theory? Well, there are a lot of components of a theory. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary says a theory is a plausible or scientifically acceptable general principle or body of principles offered to explain phenomena. Now that you've got that, we'll just move on to the next thing, right? That explained everything about counseling theories that you would ever want to know. Well, not completely, obviously. One of the things you need to understand is that a theory is an overarching umbrella that explains, for us in counseling, human behavior, the way people change, and the way people develop, why people do what they do, right? It's tested by empirical research, and they're adjusted as new research emerges. One of the things that is really important to understand that we might be talking about Freud and psychoanalysis from the point of when psychoanalysis began so that you have a clear understanding of the theory. But that theory is also used today and so has been updated and changed as new research has emerged. The other thing to think about is that you can use one theory or two theories or 20 theories or 30, right? You can be eclectic, what people call. Well, so here's what the way I'm going to teach it to you, okay? My vision on this, if you will. A theory is like the base of a house. If you're building a house, you're going to build the foundation. And the foundation has to be very strong, solid, and it has to be consistent, right? So you don't want one part of the foundation higher than the other, that kind of thing, right? Because then it won't work. The house won't settle correctly. The theory is the foundation of the house when you're working with clients. It's the foundation of everything that you're going to do with clients, the way you think about clients and the way you think about your work with them. So what we're going to expect you to do, at least in this class, is to pick one theory eventually that you might start working on towards your theory base. Now, does that mean that that's going to be the theory that you're going to continue with forever? No, absolutely not. I started out as CBT and now I'm an attachment theorist. So, and that happens a lot as you develop, as you get out and go into practicum and internship, or you continue through the coursework, or as you're working in the field. Your idea of what theory base you have is going to be different. And that's okay. We're going to explore that during this semester. But what I do want you to understand is that in order to use a theory well, you need to be an expert in that theory. And it is really hard to be an expert in 15 different theories. So we're not going to use the word theoretical eclectic because that is very, very difficult to pull off well. So for example, my theory base is cognitive behavioral theory. But then I decide working with a different client I'd like to use existential. And with a different client I'd like to use reality, which is actually not that far off from CBT. That's like building a house. One part of the house just has a cement foundation. The other part of the house has pilings under it and a cement foundation. And then the other part of the foundation is just straight wood. Over time, only one part of that house is going to stay in place. The other parts are either going to rot away or they're going to sink or crack. And the reason for that is because with clients, if you are not consistent in your approach, you're going to hamper their work. You're going to hamper your understanding of the client's work. And it's going to be very confusing to the client. So if I'm working one day in attachment theory base and the next day in CBT theory, the client doesn't know what to expect. They don't understand where we're going and they don't have a solid foundation for the point of view that helps them change. So for now, we're going to work on one theory at a time, one theory every week, or every 2 weeks, 2 theories a week. And we're going to continue that. And eventually you're going to find a theory that seems to work better for you. We'll talk more about that as the semester progresses. So what is a model? A model is part of a theory. A model seeks to explain one particular portion of a theory, or the one way that change occurs, or one piece of personality, that kind of thing. And this helps focus your work as a counselor. So if you think about psychoanalysis, that is the overreaching theory, okay? But one part of that theory is personality development. That is a model. Freud's model for personality development is usually shown by an iceberg with the id, the ego, and the superego, with some parts of the iceberg at the unconscious level, some parts at the preconscious, so just beneath the surface where we can get to them, and some at the conscious level, like we know it's happening. That is a model to explain personality development. Models, what's nice about them is that because it's a smaller piece of a theory, it's a lot easier to study. And so models tend to have a lot more empirical research behind them and are adjusted according to that, same thing as theories are. Models, remember, are then pieces of your overarching theory. Well, then what is a technique? Great question. Techniques are specific methods or skills used to help build counselor-client relationships and used to help clients move forward in their work. They can be part of a model or of a theory. However, you are going to take a whole class, if you haven't already, on counseling techniques. In that course, you're going to learn the basics of the actual techniques that we use in counseling, and that includes empathy, unconditional positive regard, closed questions, open questions, paraphrasing, right? Reframing. Those are techniques, skills, if you will, that everybody uses in counseling, regardless of your theoretical base and regardless of the type of clients that you work with. So techniques can be from a model or theory, or just an overarching set of techniques that we use. And you can be technically eclectic, even though you have one theory base. So let me give you a quick example of that. I'm an attachment theorist, and I'm working with an adolescent who has some trauma in his background, okay? My understanding of attachment theory is that I need to help this client not only work on his relationships with others, but his relationship with himself. And he's having some self-blame issues around the trauma incident, which is very typical of someone who's been through trauma. It's their fault. They should have done something differently. There are two parts of his personality then kind of warring with each other. One part that knows this was not my fault, this happens. This was horrible, but it happens. And another part of the personality that's more like, you know, I should have done something different, this is my fault. Well, that lends itself really well to a Gestalt technique called empty chair, where someone basically has conversations with two parts of the self. And we'll get more into that when we study Gestalt. I can use that technique, even though it's Gestalt therapy, within my theoretical framework of attachment, because the goal of that, or the objective of that, would be for the client to be able to have this conversation with two parts of himself, which would then help heal his own relationship with himself, which would help him become more self-aware, would help him increase his self-esteem. So that's important, and that's a goal of attachment theory. So while the technique of empty chair would come from Gestalt, my theory base doesn't change, and my reasoning for using that technique doesn't change. So I am technically eclectic. I pull techniques and methods and skills from all over the place, but within one theoretical framework. And so that's the difference, and that's how you can compare them. So let me give you an example. Here's the theory-based example. You are working with a 10-year-old girl, Isabel, who is having high anxiety when she's going to school. Beginning middle school, right? 5th grade is what she's in. And now she has to begin using a locker. Only because they're 5th grade and they're considered younger, they're not allowed to go to their lockers multiple times during the day. They're allowed to go once in the morning and once right after lunch. So Isabel is standing in front of her locker, and she's remembering what it's like and she's getting anxious, and she's beginning to have a panic attack. You understand that when you're working with Isabel, her thoughts, her behaviors, and her emotions are all interconnected. That's part of CBT theory. And they work together to help her either increase or decrease her anxiety. That's your theory base. And on the slide is a picture of Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis. Aaron Beck is holding papers in his hand, and those are some of the original theorists of cognitive theory and cognitive behavioral theory. We'll learn about them later on. You're going to use ABC model with Isabel. ABC is a typical CBT type model. We have a lot of alphabet soup in counseling. To help her determine her anxiety triggers. The activating event is her standing in front of the locker in the morning, trying to gather all of her materials. Okay. Upon further investigation, some of this might be journaling, which is all another technique, or some other things that you're doing. She begins to realize that she has a very intense fear of leaving something behind, of forgetting the right notebook or the right book or pencils or calculator or whatever she needs for that morning, because she's not allowed to go back to her locker. Her thought system is that I'm going to fail if I can't bring these things with me. So she becomes more and more anxious, and the more anxious she becomes, the more her thought processes continue to spiral towards that direction. The consequence of her nervousness and her increased anxiety based on those thought processes turns into an anxiety attack. Isabel understanding the activating event, what goes on in her head, and the consequences of that can help her work through how to calm herself down when she knows she's being activated. That sounds really simple, but it does take a bit of time to do. But that's the example of using a model within a theory base. While you're working with Isabel, you're using empathy and unconditional positive regard. Empathy is when you understand a client from their shoes, from their point of view. And unconditional positive regard is when you find something about that client that you like so that you can connect with that client. It is unconditional. So you're using these two techniques, which are very Rogerian, to build your relationship with Isabel so that you have a strong therapeutic relationship and to help her work through that ABC model. You are using techniques from a completely different theory within a model from your theory. That is the example of using a model, a technique, and a theory base. So one of the things that you hear a lot about in our classes is that counselors work from a wellness model. So we have a picture of a wellness wheel, which is an example of that, with divided up into pie pieces with physical environment, business career, finances, health, family and friends, romance, personal growth, and fun and recreation. And each of these pies has little slits on it of numbers from 1 to 10. And the idea is for you to think about where you are in each piece of that pie. What does your wheel look like? Does it look even? Does it look lopsided? Are you working really hard on personal growth right now, but because you're in school, your finances and maybe even your career are on hold, and so those numbers are lower? When we talk about the wellness model, we talk about every part of a client, who they are in their world, in their culture, in their neighborhood, in the history that they're living in, and in the majority culture. We look at clients from the whole perspective so that we can help find strengths within those clients and then utilize those strengths with clients to help them become the person they want to be, to meet the goals that they want to meet. We are very strength-based. We are looking for strengths in those clients. That is different from a medical model, which is like when you go to the doctor and you're sick and the doctor has to diagnose you to figure out what's wrong so they can fix it. We do diagnose clients as counselors. One, because it does help with treatment, because there is a lot of research out there on particular types of diagnoses. But we also remember that the client is first. So Isabel is diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. She's not anxious Isabel, and she's not my anxious client. She is Isabel. And so while we use diagnoses to help get things paid for and to help organize our treatment, we look at Isabel where she is in this moment. So she's got a strong family support. And she's working hard on her personal growth, but maybe she's not doing so much outside of school, not having so much fun and recreation because she's worried about her anxiety attacks. We're going to work with Isabel to help her round out her life as a whole, using the strengths that she has in order for her to be able to reduce her anxiety herself without us there and to become the person that she wants to be. We're going to see a lot of these question marks in podcasts, and basically these question marks mean, let us know if you have any questions. Email on me if you have questions, or upload your questions to Canvas, and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you for listening.